So my journey started when I was about 15 years old. My family was going through a very tough time. My mom and my dad both suffered from substance abuse issues. And because of that, it really affected every part of our lives, right? My dad was in and out of our life, so I didn't really have that strong male role model in my household. My mom was dealing with her issues, so we were constantly being kicked out of apartments, evicted from where we were living. Bills were not paid. We were constantly without light, gas, food. These things were happening all throughout my childhood. When I became 15 years old, these things became even more troublesome and even more hard to deal with. I remember going to school being made fun of because of my clothes or because of the fact that I lived in a poor neighborhood. I remember being bullied because of those things. So I got involved with the wrong crowd. I started getting involved with people on the streets because the people on the streets were the people that embraced me. They were the ones that didn't make fun of me. They were the ones that cared for me. I was just looking for that family feeling and ended up hanging out with people, the wrong crowd, basically. So in the middle of this time, my mom's abuse, drug abuse became worse. My dad's presence became less and less. And I found myself in a depressed state. I ended up leaving school at 15 years old, dropping out of school and staying at home for an entire year, my sophomore year of high school, because I was that depressed. It was during this time that things started getting worse financially for my family, and we ended up being basically homeless, moving from home to home, floor to floor. And my grandmother took me and my sister in and began to raise us as her own. During that time, she would tell me about Jesus. She would tell me about how much God loved me. She would give me encouragement. And I always knew that God was real because of the things she taught me. At the same time, there was a neighbor of mine that kept inviting me to this church. She kept saying, come to church with me. But my only idea of what church was, my only reference of what church was Catholic church. So I had no desire to go. So I always denied her and I denied her and I denied her. Finally, one day something told me to just go. So she takes me on a Thursday night to this church, and it's a youth ministry. And this youth ministry was massive. It was about 500 kids at the time. And everybody looked cool. I remember looking around and people looked cool. They didn't look weird. They were worshiping and praising and everybody was happy. And I remember feeling at home because of how people treated me, how kind people were to me. I ended up going on this youth retreat with them that was happening the next week. The pastor paid my way. I went on this youth retreat. And while I was on this youth retreat, I gave my life to Christ. It was the greatest feeling in the world. I never turned back to the things I was doing. I left the crowd that I was with. I left the things that I was dealing with. And I became sold out for Jesus Christ. Fast forward 15 years later, I can say that God has moved in my life. And the reason why I know God is real and the reason why I know God is moving and he can move is because during that time, 15 years later, now in my 30s, I know that God is real because not only did God save my mom from substance abuse, my whole family started serving God. Not only did my whole family start serving God, I became the youth pastor at one of the campuses of the very youth ministry where I became saved, where I was saved. I had preached many sermons at these youth retreats, the same one that I was saved at. And I just retired last year after 7 years of leading that youth ministry to go and do other things. God can do amazing things with broken people. And that has been the case in my life. And that is why I believe in God. And that is my story. That is my testimony.